Good morning, everybody. My name is Rhonda Gilbraith, and I want to welcome you to Primetime. Primetime celebrates learning in and beyond the classroom of Bethel faculty, students, and staff, and it's a collaboration between the Friends of the Bethel Library, Academic Affairs, and other offices on campus. We really appreciate you joining us here today. If you missed any of the presentations or would like to see past events, we record most of them, and you can find them archived in the Bethel Digital Library. Join us on Tuesday, February 20th, for a special Black History Month event with President Ross Allen and artist M. Gasby Brown in a conversation about her art, which is on display on the wall as you came in near the front doors of the library. Today, we welcome one of Bethel's staff, Hans Erdman, from the transportation team, as he shares his journey as a writer and his experience with self-publishing. So let's welcome Hans.
Thank you. As she said, I'm Hans Erdman, and I am a number of things, including a writer. I am with Bethel. I am the Transportation and Fleet Services Specialist, which basically means manager. I operate the shuttle system, coordinate with 15 student drivers. We have a good team assembled, and then the fleet maintenance, licensing, all those sort of things. I'm also a retired park ranger. I was with the Minnesota DNR and Anoka County Parks for 26 years before I came here, and I'm a former paramedic back in the very early days of the profession before there was such a thing as reciprocity. But I've been a writer now for a number of years, and my story is basically, this is my story within the story of publishing, within the story of the Truthbearer himself. I started writing nonfiction back in the 1980s. My first published piece was an article on the K-9 program of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Police. And from there, I've written a number of articles on dogs. I used to be a canine handler, emergency medical services, and bike patrol, which is kind of my hobby job. But I also started writing Christmas stories for my grandkids, and a lot of them were based on a fictional forest ranger in town in an unnamed mountain area, but very much like the Adirondacks where I grew up, and the exploits of a ranger named Peter Quinn. And it was in writing those stories that I first conceived the idea of an elf named Yelena who was, first of all, elves. Think Legolas, not Hermie. So if you're not familiar with Hermie, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer type elves. This is more like Legolas and Elrond and that. So anyhow, I conceived the idea of a female elf named Yelena. And in one of the stories I wrote, Peter Quinn and his granddaughter Natasha, named after my granddaughter Natasha, encounter her at the North Pole. So the Truthbearer's story really starts right here at Bethel with my wife, lovely wife Ellen, who is sitting there in her beautiful Irish sweater. On August 1st, 2016, Ellen started working here at Bethel in the enrollment department, and 2 weeks later, she was diagnosed with cancer. We didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't really know what was going to happen, whether she was going to live or die. Her mother died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Her brother endured 2 rounds of it. So it was a point, at that point, where reaching out in my mind, I grabbed hold of that character, added to her the qualities of Tariel from the second Hobbit movie, Kaelin Amnell from the Legend of the Seeker series, and a lot of it was Ellen herself. And I created this beautiful, green-eyed, immortal elf, Yelena Eularia. Like Ellen, Yelena is intelligent, savvy, determined, beautiful, but she's immortal. She can't be affected by disease. Elves can be killed, but they don't suffer from a lot of the maladies that humans do. The green-eyed elf queen in my stories gained a new life, but she needed a story, and this is it. Terry Brooks, the author of the Shannara Chronicles, says that the elves have always been with us. They just have stayed in the background of time, waiting to come forward when they were needed to support and help the human race. What I am about to read from my first book may be considered somewhat controversial, but it is in keeping with some interpretation of scriptural prophecy, and it is the basis for the ongoing journeys of the Truthbearer. Reading for the Connor Clark here. I am convinced that magic exists. Even though I am a follower of Jesus Christ, I have seen evil become more and more prevalent in this nation, and the only way it survives and thrives the way it does is through dark magic. I have looked into the dead eyes of the leaders of this nation that we used to know as the United States of America, and seen nothing but malice, hatred, and pure evil. Emboldened, I started to speak out, to call evil what it was in the public arena. The more I spoke out, the more the powers of the time strove to silence me, to silence the ones I love, to keep the truth from being known, seen, or heard. We have been persecuted for many years, and as I aged, I became aware that the persecution was taking a new form. The evil was effectively silencing the good. Believers were imprisoned and in some cases executed. Those who owned firearms held on to their weapons despite the ban of 2026 were hunted down with weapons far more advanced than their own. Magic, whether it's the evil that controls this country and its government today, or what the great lion calls the deep magic, does exist, and it does have power. When you can't silence a speaker empowered by the deep magic, you seek to kill him. When you can't kill him, you seek to isolate him. You destroy everything and everyone he loves. Then you pursue him. Drive him not just from his town, state, or even his country, but from the world, chased out of this level of existence. A number of years ago, I first became aware of the evil magic in our nations and states' capitals. I also became vaguely aware of different levels of worlds. In some of those levels, the magic, both good and evil, is very strong. In others, it's non-existent, rebuked or cast aside as irrelevant by rulers, leaders, and clergy, as it has in the world I am from. To this day, I have no idea whether what I am living is real or a dream, whether it is part of a medically induced coma or I am living this existence, but I tend to believe the latter, because I have been hurt, cut, and bled. I have made friends and traveled places that until my banishment, I believed were fictional. I spoke of the great lion. I have met him. I have spoken with him. He guides my steps. I have been to the Airylands. I've been to Balandria. I've been to Havanok, and I have stood before the Vardariana, the very tree of life. In this present form, be it real or imagined or magic, I have traveled across time, space, and dimensions to the worlds I previously believed to be epic fiction. Everywhere I travel, my message is the same. There is a great evil coming to the worlds, and we must prepare to face it or be doomed. I've been laughed at, thrown out of the halls of great kings, and held counsel with one of the greatest men of God in history. I have made friends and allies. My traveling companion, Yelena Eularia, someone who is also banished from her home, is an elven ranger who was assigned as my guardian. Now she is my wife. Together with Mentakai, the elven daughter we adopted, we bear the message, we fight the battles, and we stand side by side. I don't know if I will ever make it back to my home world until the end of all days, when in the world, that world, they face Armageddon, and whatever version of that the world I am in come to. But when that day comes, until that day comes, I continue my mission, my calling, my quest. My name is Connor Clark, and I am the Truthbearer. So, the story builds on Connor Clark being hounded, ultimately being placed under house arrest, his wife, Claire, placed under house arrest, and because he refuses to be silent, they are arrested and they're taken for execution, and at the very point where Claire is executed, Connor is able, by the power of God, to escape. He escapes and is rescued by an individual who I'll introduce in a bit, and taken to a world called Gowellan. And that is the basis of the first book. To someone unfamiliar with the process of publishing, traditional publishing may seem more desirable, but it's loaded with pratfalls. Major publishers are not looking for new writers right now. They rely on literary agents to provide these things. And literary agents are looking for books that have a potential for success. They pay significantly less in royalties than self-published books. They take control of not just the publishing side, but the creative side as well. Minor traditional publishers don't pay large advances, if any at all, and they have a significant lag time between acceptance and sales. When I pitched Truthbearer to a publishing company at a conference a few years ago, where I already had a number of my books done, the publisher gave me some really good advice that I did incorporate into my books, but he said, we're 12 books behind you already. And so that was why they couldn't proceed with acquiring my titles. On the plus side, though, if your manuscript is accepted, the publisher does all the hard work, the grunt work, the editing, the formatting, the cover art, the printing, and the marketing. And marketing is the big bugaboo in self-publishing. At the time, however, I didn't know any of that. So I looked up how to self-publish a book online, found a service called CreateSpace, which was a division of Amazon, and I bought a cover that I thought portrayed Connor's escape from this world to Gowellan through a portal, and published my first book. Little did I know what I was doing. First of all, I didn't know it was going to grow into a series. There are now 14 titles, 3 and a half separate character plot lines that are growing. And as much as I can while working here full time, I continue to produce titles and write hopefully enjoyable stories. There are 8. Joanna Penn, who is a best-selling author and writing coach in both the UK and the USA, says that while the traditional publishing process can be long and sometimes difficult to navigate, self-publishing allows writers to have complete control over the content, design, and marketing of their book. That is one of the big things I grabbed onto, and it is really important. There are 8, if you were to Google steps to self-publishing, you'd see sources like Forbes or Writer's Digest that say there are 8 accepted steps to self-publishing. Most sources agree that the first one is write a marketable story. So I have a disgraced elf queen who is sent by her grandmother, the High Queen, to take the Truthbearer and act as his guardian over the adventures that they're going to have. I have a former ranger who is the great, and probably several times removed grandnephew of William Clark, the explorer, and bears an amazing resemblance to his ancestor. And I have a rogue, aren't they all, elven bounty hunter. I think in order to be a bounty hunter, you have to go through rogue school. So named Mentakai. And Mentakai is actually a developing part of the story because very early on, Connor and Yelena are told that she will rise to be the greatest she-elf in the history of the 9 worlds. She is the Kaya Leora, the great high queen of all the elves in the 9 worlds. But at the start of this, she doesn't know that. And then we have a bad guy. And he manipulates, often unseen, unknown, and he's unimpeachably evil. His name is Declan Dark, and he is the false prophet of the Antichrist. And that is Neil McDonough, the actor. Ever since I started writing these series, I thought that Neil McDonough would be perfect to play Declan Dark. We have a cause. Persecuted on earth by the internal security forces of the one world government, Connor continues to preach the truth, the word of God, even when it costs him the love of his life. We have a rescuer, an elderly man in a long green robe who may or may not be the patron saint of Ireland. And we have something called the fluidity of time, which is actually a scriptural concept. God sees time from the very beginning to eternity and can do anything he wants with it because he's God. So if he wants to move someone to a place in time, he can do that. Example from Irish legendarium is the legend of St. Bridget being the midwife for the Christ child. God wanted, according to the Irish, somebody to deliver the child, and so sent angels to take St. Bridget of Kildare, back in time to Bethlehem and deliver the child, and then bring her back to Kildare. And so based on this, which is a reoccurring theme in my stories, the fluidity of time is how Connor ends up where he is, and members of his family join him ultimately as well. Then we have a mission or a quest to take the truth to the 9 worlds for the great lion. The great lion, Aslan in C.S. Lewis's books, is the representation of Christ in the area lands of Gwelin. And that is basically the story of the Truthbearer. The next thing that you need to do in self-publishing is edit, like, or hire a professional. Truthbearer was, my first book was weakest in this. It was riffed with, excuse me twice, where'd my water go? Was riffed with spelling, punctuation, and grammar errors. I actually had somebody who had read the first book email me through Goodreads and say, I really liked your concept, but I couldn't read the book because it was so messed up. That wasn't her words, those were mine, paraphrased. And so I went through, redid all of it, changed some of the names so that they made more sense, or they were more consistent, really. and republished it, and that's the version that you see here. But again, it's in the first person, so I decided ultimately I was going to rewrite the book, and I'm in the process of that now in the third person. When I first wrote this book, there wasn't a lot out there to help. There were things like programs that were existent within Microsoft Word, but they didn't catch a lot of the nuances, a lot of the names particularly. I've had a number of people tell me, you have so many Elven names in there, I can't keep track of them. And so I looked into a number of proofreading and editing programs, Grammarly, which kind of is the one that everyone lands on first, then Pro Writing Aid and MS Editor, and hire or beg a professional editor. I do the last three. I use Pro Writing Aid. It's a sophisticated program. It adapts well to my writing style. It also has settings for if you're writing fiction or nonfiction, et cetera, et cetera. And MS Editor, which is now included in Microsoft Word, and it picks out the spelling errors, it picks out punctuation errors, things like that. So I'll run, as soon as I finish a chapter, I'll run MS Editor, and then I'll give it to Ellen to proofread. And then when she's done and I make those corrections, I'll run it through Pro Writing Aid, which goes into much more depth, much more detail, fixes things, rates everything, actually rates it on readability too, which is kind of cool. And then I have a professional editor who is a graduate of Bethel, right? Lee Nordell, who went to seminary with my wife and lives up in Ashland, and she goes through and makes the hard calls and changes things like, I like to leave the last comma off a list of things. She likes it to be on there. I mean, that nitpicky, but that's my professional editor, and she does a really good job on it. And then it's ready to proceed to publishing. Develop an eye-catching cover design. I've been fortunate in that my books have good covers. The first one, Truthbearer, as I mentioned, I bought because I felt it portrayed what Connor was doing. The second few were pre-made covers. There are a number of marketplaces where you can buy covers, and as the stories continue, it starts to bring out the characters, that the other daughters that join Connor and Yelena, her daughter and his daughter, and then the fourth daughter who comes from another time, and ultimately the son who comes into the Mapmaker series. Mapmaker was the first title that I actually bought the cover to be made for. And I'm hoping that the artist that did that will do the cover for the second version of Truthbearer. It's won accolades from publishing circles and some of the groups that I'm part of, and it really portrays the character Tessa Chart quite beautifully. Then decide which of the self-publishing platforms are available you'll be using. There are a number of choices, which a lot of people I don't think are totally aware of. There's, of course, Amazon Kindle, Google Books, Draft to Digital, Apple Books, Kobo, Barnes & Noble. Each of them has their good points and their bads. I use Draft to Digital most of the time because it's a broad spectrum. It publishes to not just these that I've listed, but also Biblio and a couple of other services to libraries, so that if my books, particularly the ebooks, are available on those things, they are, if they're available, they're listed, they're available to libraries, and they can borrow from Biblio or the other sources in order to do that. And of course, there is the 800-pound gorilla in the self-publishing room, Amazon. Amazon has 38.5 million titles for sale, both paper, ebook, and audiobooks at any given time. They sell 300 million print books a year and 487 million ebooks every year. That's 67% of the online book market. They do offer a number of positive things, including comprehensive marketing, special promotional plans, probably the best royalty structure in the industry, 35% for books that are under $2.99 in price and 70% for books that are higher than that. And they publish in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. They do on-demand printing, so they don't have to have an inventory. You can order a copy of the books from Amazon, and within 5 days, you'll have a paperback copy. They just started the hardcover service. It's kind of in a beta format, but it is gaining popularity with people who want to have books to keep on their shelves. They have worldwide distribution channels. They're Amazon, the engulf and devour of the everything industry. One of the negatives of being listed on Amazon and they're doing your printing is that local bookstores often won't carry your books simply because they consider Amazon to be a competitor. Text formatting. They have a text formatting program or app that's not shareable, but does a really nice job at preparing books for their distribution. And they provide internal ISBN numbers so that you don't have to buy numbers at $100 a shot from Bowker, which is the National ISBN Clearinghouse. But some of their marketing plans require exclusivity. In other words, if you want to publish on Apple Books and Amazon, you can't be signed up for Kindle Unlimited because they won't allow it. Their serialized program won't, if you start serializing a book, you can't have it printed anywhere or published anywhere else. And they have some pretty restrictive print rules that have come into play, particularly since they started doing the hardcover books, that you have to match their size, their print, their fonts, so that it will fit into their publishing. I understand it, but it's not necessarily something I agree with. Then you need to format your book. And formatting is a real delicate area. Because this book, even this copy of Truthbearer, if you look at it, it's not formatted like the others are. It is a basically straightforward, there's a story, here's a map, here's what happened, blah, blah, blah. Kindle Create is their Amazon exclusive formatting service, and it helps you. It puts these things together in a more manageable, readable form. Draft2Digital has an internal program that does this, and it does a really nice job. Several of my books came from Draft2Digital formatting. It includes, title page, front page matter, dedication, copyright page, illustrations. It's easy to put in maps or illustrations, things of that sort. Of course, fantasy, you have to have maps, so people understand where you are, or they are in the book. And then there's Atticus, and Atticus is the one I've been using the last couple of years, and it's part of the network known as Rocket Publisher, or Publisher Rocket, by Dave Chesson, and he is a publishing advocate and coach, and Atticus does the most beautiful job at formatting of any of the services that I've used. And Mapmaker was the first book that I did totally using Atticus, and if you look at it, It's just a beautiful book. It's very well put together. The table of contents, dedication page, maps, et cetera, and then the chapters, the front page of each chapter has a bold title, it has the page numbers, and this is all set up in the Atticus program. Somewhere in here I want to point out, there, dedication page. It's a little picture. It should be a little bigger. Hopefully when we reprint it, it will be. But this book is dedicated to my father and his World War II B-29 crew. The airship that Tessa co-pilots is called the Starduster after my dad's World War II aircraft. So Atticus, I think Atticus is really a great tool, and I recommend it very strongly. Start your book launch, a book like a store launches a product. First of all, you need to know your market. With Amazon, with Draft2Digital, and all of the others, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, you need to know your keywords. You need to know who you're aiming this book for. So if you want, epic fantasy, then you want to include in your keywords things like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, so that when people Google or Amazon search for these things, your book will be in the list of things that they come up to. You have epic fantasy, elven romance, blah, blah, blah. There are a whole bunch of different things, and that's where Publisher Rocket, Dave Chesson's other program, comes in, because in one click of the mouse, Amazon, it will tell you, it's focused on Amazon, but it will give you keywords, categories that your book is good for, competition overview. So like epic fantasy, there are 248,000 other writers out there. That's pretty awesome odds. Then you go into Christian fantasy or Christian epic fantasy, those odds reduce. It tells you your marketing potential for each one. It's a great tool for figuring out this sort of stuff, because previously you had to sit there and say, well, okay, it's a epic fantasy, run that search. It's a elven romance, run that search, so forth and so on. So you come up with all these things on one page on Publisher Rocket. Then market yourself on social media. This may sound like a no-brainer, but it is actually the biggest pain of this type of publishing, because it sounds simple, but it's not. Social media, excuse me again. Social media has changed the way we communicate in this world. And so to say that you're going to market yourself on social media really means you're going beyond Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. I do have a website. I do have accounts on each of those three forums, but also you have to go out and you have to find a market. So I'm part of an organization of writers called Realm Makers. It's Christian fantasy writers. And in addition to having a really nice national conference every year, they provide you with contacts, marketing information, and their own pages on the above, where they have a much wider readership than just my individual accounts. Beyond that, you can take courses on how to market, how to develop a mailing list to let people know that you're putting out a new book, or you've done a revision to an existing book. This is all part of marketing yourself on social media, which goes way beyond Facebook and Instagram. So, step 8 is start work on your next book. May seem like a strange comment, but next books sell old books. So if somebody picks up a copy of Trinity of the Truthbearer and likes it, but they haven't read Truthbearer, they may want to go back and read that first book. Same thing all through the series. I am working on actually 4 right now. I'm finishing up. I'm 1 chapter away from finishing the revision of Truthbearer, as I said, in the 3rd person. 1 chapter and an epilogue. And then Voyages of the Starduster, the 2nd of the Mapmaker series. Terabet and the Terran. Terabet is Mentakai's sister or cousin, and the Terran is a colonel with the U.S. Marine Corps colonel who also ends up in the area lands through a whole different set of circumstances. Gilberton is going to be a real genre breaker for me because it is about the coal mine in Pennsylvania where my grandfather worked from the time he was 14 years old till he was 65. And it is based on the Molly Maguires, a group of Irish labor activists who were somewhat murderous. And there is so many factors to it, but Gilberton will be basically built around the fact that they never completely solved who was doing the murders. They just accused the Mollies of doing it and hung them. If you've ever seen the movie with Sean Connery and Richard Harris, my great grandfather actually was friends with the part that Connery plays, the guy Kehoe, Jack Kehoe, was the head of the Mollies, and we have a photo of my great grandpa Jack, who looks very much like me, by the way, and he ran the tavern there in Gilberton, Pennsylvania, and Jack Kehoe would come in and have a beer, and at one point, great grandpa Jack had his picture taken with the head of the Molly Maguires, who was later hung in Gilberton Prison, or Pottsfield Prison, which is where that picture was taken. So that's coming, and it evolves around, if they didn't catch the killer, who is it? And I named the protagonist after my grandfather, Bill Weeks. So, and then I'm working on a nonfiction as well, and it's kind of an extended thing because I don't get back on the Lewis and Clark Trail as often as I would like to, but I have a bucket list item of riding the Lewis and Clark Trail on my bicycle from St. Louis to the Western Sea. And I've already done major parts of South Dakota and Missouri, and keep working on it slowly. Some of the Lewis and Clark Trail now extends all the way to Pittsburgh, and we'll be heading some of that this summer as well. And I've met some amazing people, heard some amazing stories, watched God work in amazing ways when we were out on the reservations in South Dakota doing missions work. So that is my nonfiction project for this time. So I'm running a little fast on time, but if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, in the words of Blessed Padre, Te Dia, go with God. Yes?
You mentioned earlier that there are several places where one could buy a book cover. Would you mind listing some of those?
There are a number. I mean, run a Google search for pre-made book covers and you'll get a number of responses. I like to, and I work most of these beyond the first 3 are from a place called Self-Published Book Covers, very simply. And you go in, you establish an account, and they have art from numerous artists. Some of them are photographic, and they cover all genres, everything from children's stories to stuff you don't want to have in a Bible school library, and everything in between. So That's a really good source. And then you pick the picture. Ride the River is a really good example of that. When I bought this picture or this cover, it was just the compass and the river and the mountain, and I put the title in, I put my name in, and I think it was $99. I don't remember for sure. And I have exclusive rights to that for forever. There are other sources, plus Amazon and Draft2Digital will both have cover making tools in their formatting. They're a little bland, in all honesty, but they do have that available, and you can put your own pictures in those kind of covers. Any other questions? Steve?
You talked that you had approached a publisher and you decided on self-publishing. Any thought now on, okay, you've got an audience, you've got a number of books of going and attempting to publish? I think with your last name, Erdman's with two E's, a Christian publisher, like, would you go back and change it? Or do you like the flexibility? And
we've talked about that, because if you notice on the later books, they all say Hans and Ellen Erdman. And Ellen helps me with plot things that she doesn't think are quite right or are beyond what I should be writing in a Christian audience. I tend to be a little more risque than she does, especially when I was first writing and it was for young adult, for our grandkids. And it was like, no, you don't want Tasha and Sophie to be reading this. So I am going to a writers' conference in April, and I do have a pitch with a time with a literary agent there that I'm going to see if they're interested in the rewrite of Truthbearer. And, you know, we'll see what happens. I don't know. If it doesn't work out, I'm willing to continue self-publishing and hopefully devote a little more time to marketing than I've been able to. Other questions? Okay, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'm sorry that we're cutting 15 minutes early, but thank you again. If you have any questions, I'll be here. I have some of the books available if you're interested in buying a copy of any of them. And I'll be here for 15 more minutes, probably.
what's your website? Is it your name or?
Gewellyn Chronicles, all one word, .com. GEWELLYN.